Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan podcast. Martino Puccio alongside me, Matt Santangelo. Gave ourselves about 20, not even a day, to digest what we saw yesterday. Subscribe to the channel, comment your thoughts on the game against Monza before we get into it. But Matt, how are you?
Doing pretty well. It's been a busy weekend. Wedding on Saturday, rehearsal dinner on Friday. So, I was hoping the way the schedule lined up, I was like, oh, Milan's playing pretty well. We beat Rennes, we beat Napoli. I was like, Monza, it's a nice game. It's not a 6 a.m. start. So that was also very nice. And it felt good about it going in. And, well, we saw what happened and we'll get into it.
Yeah, so again, Milan losing to Monza 4-2. There was heavy rotation within this match relative to what we saw midweek against Rennes. Again, it came out afterwards that Pulisic has been tired and fatigued, and Pioli even mentioned that Leao had a calf issue, so he wasn't even fit to start, even if they wanted to do that. So that's unfortunate for Body Language FC, who wants to critique Leao for basically breathing all the time. But with that heavy rotation, we see a brand new starting trident up top with Jovic, Chukwueze, and Noah Okafor. Really difficult for them. Then we see Benacer and Yassine Adli in that double pivot. Loftus-Cheek continues to get that spot. Malik Thiaw moves into the starting lineup, who we'll talk about plenty. But with this rotation, I didn't think he would rotate as much because of the 3-0 lead that they got within Europa League. I thought, maybe put half of them in there. You see Juve slip up. But obviously you can't really start Pulisic and then Leao if they're not fit enough. And then I understand the midfield changes. So probably only the center back position. Kind of surprising to see Thiaw start there. I thought he maybe would have gotten a start in the Europa League. But nonetheless, he gets in. And ultimately, it came to their demise. And I talked about it. I highlighted it in the last podcast about how Milan tend to struggle when rotating with Europe. And with these lineup rotations, that was an issue last year, and it seems to be an issue yet again. For Milan, unfortunately, this one sits in a 4-2 loss. The first time Monza has ever scored 4 goals in a game in Serie A. And to add insult to injury, in an opportunity to jump Juve for second place, Milan somehow lose a point against them. So now they sit 2 points behind them. Let's get into it, dude. Malik Thiaw, really rough. This was a really rough performance. So your whole thoughts on the rotation, his play, and then just overall first half.
Well, look, let me start by saying I'm not going to use my time on the podcast to say, well, he rotated too much. Malik Thiaw shouldn't have done this. He shouldn't have played. We were very vocal, Martino, in the preview of this game, recap of Rennes' game and in the preview of this game, that we wanted to see some rotation. We mentioned Jovic. We mentioned Okafor as guys that we wanted to see get a little bit more opportunity. The conversation surrounding Giroud being overworked and getting a lot of minutes, and in certain parts of the matches, recently, we've been questioning why he wasn't taken off a little bit earlier for Jovic. We had a lot of the things that we wanted in a starting 11 for this game. Stefano Pioli deliver on, right? We got Okafor in a wide area. We got Jovic from the start. We got Chukwueze coming back from AFCON, right? We got some rotation in the midfield. And defensively, we saw Malik Thiaw, right? So in theory, I can't really go back, and sort of say, well, we should have done this, we should have done that. It's easier to say after the fact. When I saw the team sheet come out, I was like, okay, we rotated pretty substantially in this match, but I still expected us to get a good result or at least play a little bit better than what we saw. And the wheels fell off immediately, right? You mentioned Malik Thiaw had a disastrous first half. Really the main culprit of the 2 goals that Monza scored. And then there's Jovic with the red card, adding insult to injury.
Which we'll get to. But Thiaw, have you? I haven't seen an embarrassing 5 to 10 seconds from a Milan player since Andrea Poli was just falling on the ground trying to get the ball. That attempt out
against Napoli the first game, but
but that attempt outside the box was bad enough to warrant a yellow. But to attempt the same type of tackle inside the box after you just clearly fouled somebody was mind-boggling. That's not. You can't even get on Pioli for that. There's no one but Malik Thiaw to blame for that. And I don't want to rip on the kid. He hasn't played in months. It's a difficult spot to get in there, but it's actually unfortunately inexcusable for him. Just I'm not really sure what was going through his mind at that point. I think he was maybe just trying to make up for what he just did. And sometimes players try and overcompensate for mistakes, and it leads to more mistakes like that. And that's kind of the trials and tribulations of a young center back that gets to start. I mean, really difficult. And then he gets nutmegged on the second goal on that counter attack.
And then Danny Mota, yeah.
And then
A
even
couple
Magnan, I don't think
players,
did
yeah.
well enough on that. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's listen. The main focus of the performance was the disastrous first half because that set the tone for the rest of the game, right? When you're down 2-0,
Yeah,
I think Jovic has to keep his head. We'll talk about that, but
yeah.
when you're down 2-0 away, I don't care, how good you're playing. I don't care, maybe how low in form the other team is. 2-0 is a tough lead to overturn, especially when Milan just played a game a couple days ago. Yes, they had a commanding win there, but they still had to utilize resources to get the result. You didn't have your starting players in this. You rotated. I think if I'm just speaking on Malik Thiaw, for example, for this part of the podcast, I think it was we had again. I mentioned off the back end of the Rennes game, there were signs where he looked a little slow getting into the
Mm,
positions. He wasn't burned. Milan, it wasn't made to be a big talking point after the fact because Milan won 3-0, the Rafa goal, Ruben
yeah.
Loftus-Cheek, and you quickly just kind of brush on by it. But he had moments in that cameo against Rennes where you're looking, he's like, all right, he looks a little slow. He doesn't look like he's as sharp. And he's not well positioned. Those are the things that you can't, replace from just training. I know people will say, and you said this too, like if you're ready to play and you're available for selection, we have to criticize you as such or judge your performance as such,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you're 100%, 95%, 70%. And he doesn't look like he's a player that maybe is physically fine, but the game speed, just the strategic setup of the defense, knowing when to push up, to take the risk, knowing to sit back. I also think too, if you look at the profiles of Gabia and Malik Thiaw, and we even talked about Simon Kayer, they're not really they're not
Compliment.
comparable. They're not like, they don't provide a lot of balance. And I think that's where we start to really look to like guys like Fikayo Tomori, where you're able to use him as that guy that can go up forward, and you can have a guy like Malik Thiaw sit back. During the latter parts of last season, that's where Malik Thiaw and Fikayo Tomori looked better. I think they started to create that sort of synergy between them two, where you
Mm,
kind of knew what Fikayo's role in the defense was, and you knew where Malik Thiaw was and what his strengths were to sit back. The fatal errors that occurred in this match in this first half really looked reminiscent of the errors that Malik Thiaw committed early on in the season with Marcus Thuram.
Juventus.
Too
Yeah.
caught up, just
Yeah.
really
Well,
out of
two of them.
position and getting absolutely burned for a big goal. And when that happens, I started to kind of get a sense. I'm like, all right, this is going to be one of those games. And as we saw, it was just a disastrous first half, and Milan somehow managed to get back in there. But at the end of the day, you can't overcome for two big errors. It puts your team behind the eight ball, and they're on the road and they're rotated. They have to now bring guys in. It was a mess.
There's also the way Monza plays, where they
Yeah.
like to sit back a lot. They have quality on counterattacks. That's really Palladino's moniker. It's really why a lot of teams within Serie A love him in the future as a potential manager. He's still very young. We've highlighted that before.
Mhm.
So with that, I just think it's really hard to overcome. I don't think Milan really played that poorly prior to these mistakes. I think the offense was kind of put in an unfortunate and unlucky spot. I think Chukwueze, there were certain things where he's just losing the ball. It's kind of frustrating to see. But also at the same time, chemistry-wise, it's just not there. Again, you can't really blame Pioli too much with that. But it's everybody to blame though. Like
Yeah.
the manager has to have these guys ready and prepared and ready to play with one another. You have to have the players not be losing the ball so easily. That has nothing to do with chemistry, right? Just like when Yunus Musa gets put on into the match against Lecce, his mistakes were not anything reflective of the formation or the position he
No.
was playing in. Those are just professionals making fundamental errors that cannot happen. The same thing that happens with Malik Thiaw. It was issues even during their Scudetto winning season. It's lingered into last year. And again, they've conceded 31 goals. The next closest team to them on the table with that is Genoa. They're 12. 12. The
Milan
12th place
conceded.
team.
Yeah. That's such an alarming
And
again,
yeah,
if you tell us that stat, and you tell any Milan fan that stat, I don't think they're surprised in any way, because they know how well documented our defensive issues have
issues
been through
are,
the
yeah.
entire season, or really last 2 seasons, where we've been just kind of that team that is really prone to switching off, and we can get gashed quickly for goals, and leads can evaporate very quickly. We saw the Napoli game, we saw the Lecce game, even this game where we weren't necessarily ahead, but we gave up 2 goals where you're like, man, Milan's down 2-0. Now it's like you got to bring in every guy. You got to bring in
Yeah.
Pulisic. You got to bring in Giroud. You got to bring in Rafa. And I think it really sort of highlights that while Milan did obtain and acquire some really good depth pieces,
Yeah.
there's certain players within this team that, frankly, this season at least, are irreplaceable. Like you had a whole different attack, and none of those attackers did anything noteworthy. What do?
Yeah.
You bring in the other 3. Pulisic assist, Giroud gets the goal, and Rafa at not full strength still feels more dangerous than any of the 3 players that we started.
Mm.
So I think if I'm being honest with the situation and how we rotated after the fact and looking at it now, I probably would have went with a little bit less of an aggressive rotation. But I think after the match took place the way it did, and we heard some of the comments from Pioli regarding Pulisic's fitness and Rafa's, reluctance to want to give it a go, I could kind of understand it. I just think it's one of those things where, look, Chukwueze came back from AFCON. He hasn't had a great season. He's got, I think, 1 assist in all the appearances in Serie A. He's obviously behind Pulisic on the depth chart. And we talked about this too, Martino. I'm not giving up on the player, but I think when we brought in those 3 new attackers, we brought in, Okafor, we brought in Jovic, we brought Okafor and Pulisic and Chukwueze. I said to you when we talked about this, we're like, one of these guys is not going to be a good signing. It's just the averages. One of them, and I'm not giving up on Chukwueze.
I know.
But
it's just
when you look at everything, it's kind of shaking up to be one of those, like, this is our year's version of CDK, where it's like you spend a decent amount, he doesn't deliver, and now you're like, we don't have that depth now because we can't really trust so much in Chukwueze yet. So
it's none of it's consistent play. He has to go. He has to go to Nigeria. He has to go with his national team. That's fine. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
He scored what was the winner in the Champions League to keep our hopes alive. It was a massive moment. He has not gotten any consistent play whatsoever. And part of it is because Pulisic has played so well and got there earlier in the summer, which again is well-deserved. I'm not calling for Chukwueze not to start. But when Pioli kind of puts this guy in a situation like this, and it is on Pioli because the guy has to get some blame, because I'm really tired of the manager getting all the praise for when he makes his selections and they produce, but he doesn't get any criticism when he puts these guys in and they fail him. So he can't benefit on one side and doesn't receive criticism for the other. That's what bothers me about a lot of people. And now with that said, it's eerily reminiscent to what happened to CDK last year in terms of the manager putting him in situations for him to succeed. So when CDK gets put on in the match against Sassuolo, where Milan can't stop conceding goals, they lose 5-2. CDK gets put in a lineup with guys he's never played with. The same situation in Coppa Italia against Torino as well. How is he supposed to build up any chemistry? How is he supposed to get any better? And you're in a do or die situation where you need to pick up points. So obviously you have to sub off the players that aren't probably playing as well. And even then, it's not even their fault. Were they playing that awful prior to that, the attackers? No, and I know that's not even what you're saying anyways, but they're now put into this position because the defense is horrendous, like absolutely amateur level. And then just to get over to this side of the thing, this Jovic red card, this discipline, this lack of discipline from the players is also a reflection of the manager. They have the most red cards in Serie A, by the way, okay? We're talking about a team that wanted to compete for a title. They are making the dumbest errors that you could possibly see. Terracciano, unfortunately, with that penalty against Bologna late, a really silly foul, not even necessary. Then you see what Thiaw has done. We've seen even Tomori against Roma as well with that red card. Magnan, I mean, oh my goodness, like making that mistake with his red card where he jumps out of the box against Genoa leading with his knee. There's so many different scenarios and instances that we see nonsense type of fouls, even Pellegrino against Napoli. Like the list goes on and on. If you know you're having difficulty defending, okay, why do you not change up the way you play? And Pioli has literally been on record saying we are not going to change that. Well, you know what? Maybe you should if you can't stop conceding so much. Maybe that means you have to change some things up. The fact that they still scored 2 goals, again, which we'll get to, down a man in the second half on the road against a very defensive side, just shows like how much of a lost opportunity it was as well. Because Jovic losing his head here, I don't care if it was soft or whatever. You do not react like that. Itzo is the perfect instance or example of a defender who wants to get inside your head and make you do something like this. And that's exactly what he got.
Especially when people are like kind of petitioning for you to get more starts and more
Which he kind of
opportunities.
earned. He did earn
Right.
it.
Like so you get to the position where most of your goals, most of your production is coming off the bench, and it's in key moments in matches, and it's gotten us a handful of points. So you get the opportunity to start. This should be the opportunity where you go and say, you know what, Drew, I got this one. Sit this one out. You get the rest. I'll come in here and I'll do the job for us, and I'll prove that I'm someone that can take on more responsibility within this team. Now it almost looks to be, one of those things where, again, Giroud's a teammate, but like a last laugh type thing. Like, you guys really think you could just replace me with Luka Jovic and you're to get the same player in production? Giroud comes on and he gets a goal, like from a flick, from nothing.
Yeah, from nothing.
Right? It's
Great
like,
point, by the way.
it's just amazing how we've become so dependent on a handful of players. Where you take Rafa out of this team, it's a vastly different team, and it's been like that for a couple years now. You take out Giroud from the striker position, Jovic has had his moments, yes, but still, for all the criticism Giroud gets, he gets a goal. Like, his job is to score goals. He gets his 12th goal of the season. He has 8 assists. He has 20 goal contributions in Serie A. Right? Like, I'm sorry, but like, when you look at a match like this, it almost kind of makes the Pioli in people and the Pioli backers look smarter, saying, "Oh, you guys all wanted Jovic, huh? Look what Jovic did. You guys all wanted Chukwueze to get more opportunity, and you called for Okafor, right? They didn't do anything. The guys that we benched for this game came on and
Can't
got us
can
points."
never criticize Pioli's defensive system, right? It's
No,
not on the manager that he
no,
has to make those substitutes. And I'm not saying that you're saying that,
no.
but it's bullshit. I'm sorry, it's utter garbage. People want to look at a lens through one way because they have this narrative that they want to back the manager. The manager deserves to stay to the end of the season. There's no denying that at
Yeah,
this point. There's
that's
no
what I mean.
adequate replacement to come in the middle of the year. You could still think that and also think he's not adequate to stay beyond this year.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of goals that they're conceding, the regression rate is absurd. Like, this is not acceptable. And I don't care about the injuries. The injuries are also reflective of his training methods too. And nobody wants to blame him for that, despite the owner coming out and saying that he needs to take onus for it. And also, this manager does not want to sack his guys that are on his training staff. So again, this guy is absolved of all blame. It's honestly insane.
And also
because
too,
it's just not fair. Go.
Martino, we've been talking about how, Milan have been thankful to have a very comfortable lead in the third position, flirting with second, right, and really relatively safe from missing out on top four. We know this team. Milan fans know this team quite well. If you watch of all the games, like we have over the past couple seasons, more specifically, right, you can kind of get a sense and a reading and temperature on whether this team is heading into a difficult position of the season. Now, last year, to start 2023, they were horrible. They limped to a top four spot. Absolutely limped, right?
Mm-hmm.
This year, they were, aside from the loss to Atalanta 3-2 before the new year, they were on a pretty good run. I think they were unbeaten in 12 of 13. I think their only loss was the Coppa Italia game against Atalanta, right? In all competitions. So they were getting results. And we've been talking that the results are the only thing that matters at this point. However, with the caveat being, they're getting results, but there's something that itch in the back of your mind and the back of your neck thinking like, something could come. Something could come. Eventually, your luck is going to wear out. Eventually, those breaks that you get, those Jovic 83, 84th minute winners, those goals like that, they're going to evaporate. They're going to vanish. You're going to regress to the mean, and you're going to get exploited. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. So Milan has to be very careful here. I still feel comfortable top four. I'm not saying that we should panic and go into this whole your retreat with the team, but you and I know the run they've been on without context looks great, but the context truly does matter in this situation, because if we're not careful, one loss becomes two, then there's a draw, and then you're thinking, man, Atalanta won 3 in a row while you've lost 2 and draw 1. Like those things can quickly get away from you, and Milan has to be very careful with that, because they do have, again, some tricky matches coming here as they get further too. If they do advance in the Europa League, now it's we talked about it. How does Pioli rotate? Well, so far he's had a couple months off between the Champions League group stage and not making it to the knockout round to the first leg against Rennes, and we're seeing how he's rotating and how he's planning and how the team is ultimately performing. And so far, it's the Napoli game, the Rennes game, which we got a great result, and now an absolute disaster here. So make of that what you will.
And it's down to individual errors. Like, I think they probably can come out, and it's just, you can't say in hindsight, unfortunately, but when you have guys who commit this, like, they're such stupid avoidable errors, that's what makes it more difficult, because you get guys like Pulisic and Giroud who come on within minutes, basically, and start producing. And the fact that they're doing this down a man because Jovic wanted to play whatever the hell that was. I mean, Pulisic's left-footed shot. And then again, the approach after that. Take the point. You take the point. Like, the way that they were just setting up, and they were actually trying to go for the win. I think it's admirable if you have 11v11.
They were 10v11. They were exhausted.
Is silly. Point. It's nonsense. Stay behind the ball. Where's the organization? Where are the directions from the manager saying, "Hey guys, stop doing that.
Look your medicine and take the point."
They got diced open. Open. I'm sorry. That's also a reflection of the manager. And poor Pulisic, because this performance was fantastic. He would have bailed them out with this too. The flicked header was phenomenal. The finish by Giroud, fantastic. He's having one of the best poacher seasons that I could remember in recent memory. And it's just all gone to waste, unfortunately, with that. Our lone players look good. Daniel Maldini gets the assist to Bondo. I think it looked like it took a slight deflection off of Gabbia. I'm not 100% sure, the way it kind of curled into the top corner. Bondo is a pretty talented player too in his own right, so kudos to them on that. But the fourth goal was infuriating, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Colombo on his weak foot, beating Magnan on his near post. And it's getting really hard to defend Mike now, because these are just really shaky performances. Maybe something from Udinese is lingering with him. That's been a difficult moment. I don't want to create or make excuses for him. I don't know what's going on in his head. Maybe contract renewals have something to do with it. The fact is, like you said earlier, if Malik Thiaw and a guy like that is playing and you're healthy enough to be on there and mentally like okay to play, then the criticism is warranted. He's been very poor this year. He's been mediocre. When Magnan's on, he's fantastic, but he's been more off than on this year. Speak on the loanees first and then Magnan, because this is,
Man, as if the match itself wasn't bad enough. We get Gasha. All I see is young Daniel Maldini come in. Of course, he went on loan to Empoli, cut that loan prematurely, went on loan to Monza for the remainder of the season last month. And of course, I see him walking. I'm like, oh, here we go. I've seen this one before. I think when he was at Spezia, he actually scored a great goal against Milan too. And Maldini his father was in the crowd.
Yes.
So there's always like that sort of thing where I'm like, oh no, he's going to get a goal or something. Something's going to happen. Gets the assist you mentioned. And then I see, like, I truly, like, if you're a neutral in the match, you are loving this. If you're an Inter fan, Juventus fan, like, you're loving it.
How could they not?
But I'm watching this, and I literally couldn't keep up. Like, I was on my phone looking at tweets, and I saw Colombo go, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, dude, this is bad. Like, this is just a bad match. My head was killing me. I was tired. And then you drop this absolute stinker of a performance. Credit to the guys. Credit to Maldini, Colombo. I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to change anything about what we think their future is at Milan. I think both pretty much don't have a future at this club. I think Maldini will maybe be returned or maybe get sold nominal fee to someone. And I think Colombo is just obviously not the answer for us, even in a backup position. So, I mean, it's good to see. It's good to see for them. It just comes at the expense, of course, against Milan, their parent clubs. And it was kind of like almost like a fitting finish to what was a disastrous match for Milan.
Yeah. And again, Maldini and Colombo have done nothing this year for the most part. Maldini
No.
had a failed loan at Empoli. They recalled him, sent him back to Monza. And again, we're not even talking about I didn't even mention the gift that was Di Gregorio going out. One of the
Yeah.
best goalkeepers in Serie A this year.
Yeah.
I hope he's okay. That was very scary. The concussion
Marco
protocol
made a
was
good point too. He at halftime he said that Di Gregorio he feels like it could be strikingly his situation could be strikingly similar to like a Vicario where he's not playing at a big club, but then a team snaps him up and then he does well, and you wonder like, wow, who is this guy? He's a good goalkeeper, and I think people will look at the team they play on and maybe how many goals they score or they concede or what their position is in the table. But I always look at goalkeepers. I'm like, you're really only as good as what your defense can do in front of you, and if you're able to somehow be one of those last lines of defense that wins points because of your heroics in
he
goal.
has. Yeah.
I think he's a prime example of that. He's a fine goalkeeper.
And again, we'll clip this now because I want this for the future. The way Mike Maignan entered the club and how they're going to get his replacement is eerily similar to what happened with him. Meaning, I think he's going to be on his way out, and I think Milan go and get a replacement for cheaper, like a De Gregorio. I think that's a very legitimate option. And I think that's what they do and take some of that money from selling Mike. I honestly think that's eventually what ends up happening. That's just me and my prediction with it. Again, I feel bad for him, but he is not making a good case for $8 million net a year, Matt. I just after all this, considering injuries as well, I said it. I got heat for it back then. I said I'm fine with giving him $6 million net per year. I'm perfectly fine with that, even if it has incentives. But if you're taking into account him asking for $8 million net flat, no, the club can't do it. They can't have their highest paid player as a goalkeeper getting $8 million net. Would I love to keep one of the best goalkeepers in the world? Absolutely.
And making again, I grant, and I use the same thing with Donnarumma, right? Where we were very hard on Donnarumma. Perhaps you could even say we were bitter the way things took place, right? With his contract renewal, then he eventually signed. He got this big wage, and now everyone was like, well, you have to look at him and treat him as a top goalkeeper, and using the age excuse. You can't use it. You can't use the age excuse. And look, I think if you're a player, that's what people have been using with Rafa, right? They said, he's getting paid all this money. He's got the number 10 shirt. We expect more. The bar has been raised. It's the same thing too with Mike Maignan. He's been great, and I'm not saying I want him gone. I'm not saying I don't respect and admire the work he's done, because I think he's a great leader and he's a great goalkeeper, despite some of the more recent issues in net. But I think it says a lot where you're saying, "Hey, I want $8 million." You're like, "All right, we'll talk. Maybe we'll see if we can get close to there." But now you're like, you got to show that you're deserving of that. And right now, if I'm the one handing over that contract and at the negotiation table, I'm thinking like, Mike, like, we love you, man, but like, bro, you've been getting beaten near post far too much.
There's a couple of things that I think Milan have a legitimate claim to when they're into these negotiations. Past 2 seasons, let's go over it really quick with him. Injured basically all of last year.
Yeah.
Not even available. Missed time that first year when they won the Scudetto, but he was so amazing, it really didn't matter that he missed a handful of games.
Yeah.
Look towards this year. Misses a couple matches. Horrendous at a lot of times. A lot of time. He's not even been a top 5 goalkeeper in the league this year. That really says a lot. Partially, I don't like doing goals conceded, as you mentioned, because it's really just reflective of what does your defense allow you to save? What kind of situations is a goalkeeper put in? He's under fire a lot, and it's really hard for him in certain occasions. But with that said, like, you see the goal against Colombo yesterday. You see these recent stretch of matches, and you're like, this isn't good enough. You see the game against Dortmund, even in the Champions League, arguably cost Milan.
Yeah.
He hasn't really stepped up to save a penalty. Now penalties are really difficult to save, but I can't remember the last time he did save one. There's just been a lot more negatives than positives for Mike the past 2 seasons. And when you're kind of asking for a lot, you really look at it. Okay, technically a third of the years that you've been here, you've been great. So where does this 8 million net come into mind? It's kind of difficult when you sit there and look at it. Milan are going to have a really difficult decision ahead this coming summer. Ultimately, I think what ends up happening is what Jerry Cardinal was saying in his recent interview, 50 to 100 million will be invested. And I think that comes in from player sales, making
Yeah.
top four again. And if you get a sale of Mike Maignan, which I think would be at least around 60 million, you're looking at nearly 170 million on the market. I'm just saying, if you look at that, it doesn't matter what you guys might think about, oh, I don't want this manager or director spending money.
I
It's a lot
think
of money for a
too.
club to spend.
I also think too. It's worth pointing out that look, the goalkeeper position is very important. This isn't going to be a conversation of whether or not I think it is, because it obviously truly is. And a great goalkeeper can do an awful lot for you in winning trophies and getting far in, European competitions. But I think it says a lot where you look at how Inter have built their team,
Yeah.
and they're a prime example. They're a model for building a strong defensive team and how you can put a goalkeeper in there in net that's dependable with veteran experience and do as good of a job, if not better. They've always had the strong defense. They had Onana, signed him on a free, sold him for a ton of money, right?
Insane business, yeah.
And then they go and get Jan Sommer, and everyone's thinking, like, oh, they got rid of Onana. He was so good with his feet. He could pass. He could do
Oh,
this.
I love this Sommer signing from the start.
Well, and I even said that too. I said that to Sharma. I said that to a lot of Inter fans too. And I was like giving my honest opinion on it. I'm like, man, this is a smashing deal for them because Sommer's established. He's a veteran. He's played at big clubs before. He's played
literally
under
just at
pressure.
Bayern saved their season.
You're gonna
just
tuck
last
him.
year.
You're gonna tuck him right in behind that really good defense, and he's gonna have. Basically, he's good. You're not going to see much of a regression because I think that's a direct reflection on their coaching, but I also think it's direct reflection
It's
on where
always
they've built and stabilized their team, and that's with a great defense, and that's what you're starting to see. Sommer's done a great job for him, and I think it's proof that I think Milan are probably looking at it and saying, "Man, if we can get 60 million from Mike Maignan, 65 million to a Premier League team, or even a French team, or
I think
whoever,
PSG. I think
you
PSG
can
will do
you
it.
can
Yeah.
say and spin that and say, could you not get someone in the Vicario range of fee for 20 million that can do as
We
good of a
literally,
job?"
we like I said, we got Mike for the 13. And I know he
Right.
had 1 year left on his deal. There's differences with
Still.
it,
Yeah.
but they proved it. They
Yeah.
proved it. And even Inter do it as well on the market, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Free player transfers. You just have to spend a little bit more. There has to, it's ambition with the club. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
It comes down to if you have too many projects, like you mentioned, you can increase your rate of failure because you're rolling the dice a bit more. When you
Yeah.
get guaranteed proven commodities like a Jan Sommer, a Pavard, a Thuram, right? Even a Zielinski and a Taremi now,
Yeah.
you know what you're getting. With Milan, you're kind of like, Serginho Dest, roll of the dice. What do we got?
Yeah.
CDK, very talented. Does he fit with us? We don't know. Roll of the dice. Okafor, Tijani Reinders, not really at big clubs. Have they had experience in Europe? Yes. Roll of the dice still. Guys who have had injuries, prone careers. It's really difficult when it comes down to stuff like that. But overall, the bigger picture is not too bad. Milan head into leg 2 against Rennes as we wind on down for this podcast right now with a 3-0 lead. People are already bringing up Deportivo from 20 years ago about, hey, no leads are safe. We know a 3-0 lead with this club. You're not going to find a supporter who is going to say, yeah, a 3-0 lead is safe. You've been supporting this team for over 20 years. You know that's not true. Okay. That's the most scary lead for us. I think everyone had Sassuolo 3-0 in the city when we're watching. Didn't feel safe on the final match day. I don't see much rotation here. Maybe Davide Calabria gets back in. I think you're going to see the usual starting 11 in here. The guys that need to seal it off. Now, will they play the full 90 minutes? I don't think so. I don't think that's necessarily the case. If Milan, say they get a goal, or they don't even concede and it's like, 45 minutes to go in the second half, maybe you see some substitutes. But if Milan concede and they're still up 3-1, I don't actually foresee Pioli making some changes in that second half, maybe a couple, just for sort of fresh legs or to try and seal off the match. But Matt, they're well positioned here. I think if Pioli feels safe heading into this second half of this leg, I think you see him substitute some guys out because, like we highlighted last podcast, Lazio, Atalanta coming up in the league. So your thoughts?
Yeah, we'll see some rotation. I don't know, maybe Pioli will have second thoughts given what just transpired against Monza and thinking how aggressive he is with that rotation. I
Mm,
do feel that Giroud will be back on there to start. Rafa, of course, if he's dealing with a calf strain, I think is what the reports have been saying. So we'll have to wait and see how he looks for this game. He played a decent amount in the game against Monza, and
yeah.
when you're down a man, maybe there's more running. It's a little bit more responsibility in that game. So it's not like he had like an easy 45. But he looked like he was limited. So we'll have to wait and see. Does it maybe Pulisic on the left, Chukwueze on the right if Real can't go, or maybe is it Okafor? Who knows? That's another conversation to have. But I think really you have to just avoid the disastrous mistakes in defense, and you have to avoid giving away a cheap goal quickly and early in this
Yeah.
game, because I think that'll give Rennes a ton of confidence. I think Rennes have actually won 8 straight in the league, if I'm correct,
They were in incredible
or
form in the
unbeaten
league
in
at
8,
first.
whatever it is. But they came
Yeah,
into
right.
the first leg against Milan, on a really good stretch of performances. So
Yeah.
the fact that Milan were able to go and follow that game up with the way they did against Monza is pretty. Well, I guess it's pretty Milan-esque, if you will. I think we've seen enough of this team over the
Yes.
past couple of years, but I think we'll get the result here just to kind of put a bow on what I think is going to happen. I think we'll see some rotation. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. I do think Rennes definitely get a goal in this game at home, especially. I think they have nothing to lose now. You're down 3-0. Why are you not going to push guys forward and try to score early? Milan, again, as I mentioned, they have to avoid giving away a quick early goal in this game, because if you give Rennes a goal inside the first 15 minutes, it's going to give the home crowd life. It's going to give Rennes life. And they got some players in that team that can do some damage. Now, we didn't see it so much at the San Siro. I think that Milan did a good job of getting a cozy lead, and that kind of really just took the wind out of the sails of Rennes, who probably wanted to come in there and make a statement and play the way they wanted to play and set out to
Yeah.
play, but then that changed. So I think Milan get a result here. They move on. I'm not saying it's going to be convincing, though. And at the end of the day, we've been saying it, right? Like, we don't both believe that Pioli is the right guy going forward beyond the season.
Yeah.
It's just about getting results and kind of maybe making sure that we can make a deeper run in the Europa League and finish off top 4. That's really all that Milan fans could actually ask for right now.
Yeah. I think just advance. Hopefully get something commanding. Like say if we get a goal or two in the first half, I wouldn't even completely rule it out. I think if you well position yourself, you set yourself up well to rotate and sub out guys for this weekend, because Atalanta are back to having our number, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 straight defeats against them in matches in where we were blowing leads, or I mean, the loss in the league, that was the last loss prior to this Monza defeat, was at Atalanta, where Muriel gets now Orlando City owned, so Milan don't have to worry about that. Shout out Tom Bogert reporting that story. They don't have to worry about that, but good Lord. Yeah, again, Lazio and Atalanta, the next 2 matches for there. I think Milan advance. We'll see what happens with the round of 32, I believe it is, because it's a 60. I don't know. It's a ton of teams right now, or this might be round of 32. But with that, Milan really need to sharpen up, but it'll be a positive. I mean, if you advance in Europe, that's also a good morale boost. I think there's silver linings and positive ways to look at things. Will Milan be committing those terrible errors again? Probably not, but they also did create plenty down a man. So they're still playing good attacking fluid football. That's one of those things that we could at least hang their hat on. We'll see if Rafa recovers in time. He has a few days in order to do that. Atalanta as well, looking ahead to that weekend match. They're also in Europa League, so we'll see how Gasparini handles that. Either they're in Europa or Conference League, I forget. I think it's Europa, because Gasparini and Pioli keep on going back and forth. No, you're a favorite. No, you are. No, you're a really good team. No, shut up. Stop. But anyways, for us here at Milan Podcast, we appreciate all of you who have tuned in and helped us out. We'll be going live after leg 2 this week. I'm not sure if Matt will be able to join me. If he can, he will. And yeah, of course, we appreciate all the support. Once again, That Milan Podcast on Twitter at That Milan Pod. Again, we had almost 90% of you listen to the last podcast all the way through. Really appreciate all the support. Please, even if you don't follow or listen on Spotify, just follow us. Just do it. It helps us. We need to build up that following on there. And again, if you strictly listen on audio platforms like Apple and Spotify, It's greatly appreciated for everything that you do in terms of supporting us and our YouTube gang. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Love hanging out and talking to you guys pretty much every single match. Santangelo, any like final thoughts or anything before we head out?
Yeah, gonna echo the same stuff I usually do. Thank you guys. Thank you to the community for supporting us, subscribing, leaving the comments. Me and Martino read them all. We have conversations back and forth about it. We take into consideration what you guys are saying as far as maybe suggestions and your thoughts, your opinions. So thank you so much, and also make sure to go check out the Benjamin Sesko video. We dropped that on this past weekend. It's doing really well, more or less aligned with the Joshua Xerxes player profile, player focused video we put out a couple weeks ago. So make sure to go check that out. That's available on YouTube.
And comment on what striker you want us to profile next. We're trying to get guests on soon as well. Give it a little bit more variety with the podcast and the show. But again, we love you guys so much. We really appreciate everything. Hopefully, more positive results will come our way. But yeah, other than that, take care.